Hello, my name is Mark Smith. I am a account manager with Avnet Technology Solutions. I manage EMC channel partners here in Texas as well as the Midwest part of the country. I'm here today to accept a challenge. That is the XtremIO Gen 4 Certification Challenge. And this was given to me by my boss, Dave Bulldog. But before I get into that, let me explain to you where I'm at today. I'm sitting here in Austin, Texas at the state capitol behind me here. And as we know, here in Texas, we are considered the Lone Star State. So why is that relevant? And where did it ever come from? Well, it came from where we were the only independent republic back in the 1800s to eventually become a state. Because of that, we were deemed the Lone Star State. And why is that relevant for today? It's because I feel the XtremIO all-flash array is superior to the competition, is all alone at the top of the list of all flash arrays. Hence, I believe it's a Lone Star. So let's get into it today. Back in 2014, David Floyer developed a Wikibon article that talked about all flash arrays, talked about the evolution of flash, and really discussed where it's been, where it's going, and where it's at today. So with that, we broke out the conversation into 4 different generations. And the first generation was something called exploitation. And this is really the entrance or the initial launch of an SSD drive. And back in 2005, Apple actually launched the first SSD drive to the consumer market within their Nano device. And in 2008, shortly thereafter, EMC launched theirs in the VNX. And as you can imagine, we saw some improvements with speed, some performance. I/O was increased, IOPS were increased. Things like databases saw that improved performance and could take some advantage of having those solid state drives in the array. But as you can imagine, you're simply putting a very fast drive in an array that's designed for a much slower drive, like a mechanical drive or spinning disk type drive. So it did have its limitations in what it could perform. But quite honestly, it did give some confidence to the industry. They saw this as an advantage, although very expensive. They saw it as an advantage in being able to maximize performance of their applications. So moving from there, we move into the hybrid generation. And this is where some arrays that were to some degree designed for a SSD drive were becoming introduced. Tentry, for instance, is a startup that developed something called Flash First. And this was the technology where it allowed us to take advantage of a flash drive to buffer data between it and a slower drive, such as a spinning disk drive. And it allowed data to come and go at a very high rate of speed, and then based upon access to that data, would eventually allow that data to trickle down into the more or the less expensive drives to ensure they're maximizing those more expensive drives. But at the end of the day, we saw some improvements with that. VNX, for instance, also did some controller software upgrades to recognize an SSD drive back in those days. So certainly there were some enhancements to better take advantage of those drives. But at the end of the day, you know, these hybrid storage arrays were really linked to the disk drives, meaning they were limited to only what the mechanical disk could do. So from that generation, we move into something called the adoption generation. And this is when truly all flash arrays started to become available. And you may know that Pure Storage launched a flash array. And as well as Pure Storage, we also had an IBM array. And the unique part of these was they were clearly architected around taking advantage of the flash storage, but there were limitations. What were these limitations? Well, to some degree, you had to sort of pick. Did you want speed or did you want services like compression and dedupe? The IBM array, it gave you the speed. That is the array that allowed for that. But it really was limited on the services. Unlike Pure Storage's array, it did provide some inline dedupe. It did provide some compression, but it was limited on the speed. So in that time, it was very difficult to have both. And at the same time, within those arrays, you had dual controllers. And with any controller, you were also limited in how that data would flow through that controller. So with that, you also had those limitations. So with that, you move into generation 4, or what we like to call the XtremIO generation. And this is where the need to have scale out shared data architecture, the ability to be able to scale your space on that drive beyond a single array was needed. There were some unique traits that a modern electronic data center is required to have. Things like scalability. XtremIO has that capability where we can cluster multiple appliances together to be able to easily maximize your capacity and scale out without impacting performance. Consistent latency. This was another must-have when you think about an application, a large database. You need to have consistency in how you're able to access that data. And with the XtremIO, we're able to provide an even distribution of data access across all the arrays, all of the disks within that cluster. Advanced snapshots. Having that technology where you can take advantage of the high density of flash. It allows you to do snapshot copies of data where, quite frankly, the performance of accessing those duplicate snapshots were as fast as if you were accessing the original data. So certainly much needed requirements. Then the advanced quality of service. These are things like performance, capacity, protection. You can't give up any of those capabilities for a high-end electronic data center to be able to deliver on the needs of the business. And we believe the XtremIO array allows you all of those traits. It gives you that scalability. It gives you the consistent latency with the ability to spread data across all of those drives. It allows you to do some of the unique services like inline dedupe, encryption, compression. It gives you those tools to best maximize and manage the data that you have on those drives. And ultimately, we believe at the end of the day, the XtremIO is positioned the best of any array out there and can provide the requirements of the business for any company out there. So with that, I believe I'm Gen 4 certified, and I'd like to pass the challenge on to two of my partner sales managers in Texas, Dan Hare and Steve Jacoby. Thank you very much.